Oh, hi there. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 5 of Country Crocked. I can't believe it's not better. You're here with your hosts, Kendra and Angela, and today's episode is titled, What Sharp Teeth You Have. As we talk about how wolves manage to infiltrate the sheep pen, we'll be covering themes of childhood sexual abuse, emotional and domestic violence, and addiction, so listener discretion is advised. And we're also asking for a little extra grace from our listeners today. You may notice some strange noises around the 30-minute mark. Don't adjust your volume or troubleshoot your speakers because it's not a technical issue. And it's definitely not a beluga whale. Really, it's just Kendra's dog Boomer having a really loud nap. We hope you enjoy.
Hey Kendra, how you doing?
Hey, Ange, how are you?
Oh, good. Like I did all my throat clearing before you hit that record button, so I'm prepared to, you know, keep delivering those silky smooth sounds of our Midwestern accents.
Oh,
Uh,
yes, yes. Yeah, it's been a crazy week. Good, bad, ugly, good, pretty, whatever. It's been a week that has had every emotion thrown into it, not just due to podcasts, but we have to remind people we actually live live outside of this podcast. um, and Angela and I were just talking. She actually tried a new drink. What was it? Pistachio.
yeah, I got one of those pistachio lattes, that everybody's been buzzing about. They keep talking about like the brownies, the lattes. Well, I didn't tell you. I also got the pistachio baklava, which was
Well,
delicious.
yeah. So then the calories really went up. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
yeah.
I'm glad you can eat that. If I look at it, I'm gonna gain weight. So yeah, not gonna happen. But yeah, maybe I'll try it with like almond milk or something if they have a sugar-free version. I will try it.
Come on in and grab a seat. There's no better place to be. Two Midwestern Gen Xers emotionally stunted. Subtlety was not part of our upbringing. So here we are in all of our glory, country crocked. I can't believe it's not better.
We're hitting a topic today. I think it's gonna be one of my favorites. I know last week was one of your favorites, and last week's was great. But
It was
we're talking about
heavy.
it was heavy. But it was a good. And I always, you never know what something's going to come out like until after you're done editing and you put it out. And I listened to it for the first time like 2 days after, or actually maybe a day after you put it out, because I had just some crazy scheduling going on. But it really, like, listening back to it, I felt like I was just a listener and not a participant of the conversation. Like, it really touched a lot of things and made me think about a lot of things that you had said. So, this week we're doing wolves in sheep clothing. And wolves in sheep clothing, of course, we're going to talk about your dad and keep our focus there. But there are so many people in our listening audience that they have wolves in sheep's clothing around them. They just don't know that they have them. And, there's a Sermon on the Mount. I'm sure if you are a spiritual person or you go to church or you read your Bible, Jesus's speech when he gave the Sermon on the Mount. And one of the biggest things he said was in Matthew 7:15. He said, "Be aware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous snakes." Yeah, he did say false prophets, and he was kind of leaning towards like people that preach falsely. But these verses are also for us today. And I think it's in people in general. He is warning us, every day before I talk to somebody as an adult now and being healed and putting my faith in God, I always pray for discernment before I speak to someone. And God,
Absolutely.
show the snake. If there's a snake, show it. And wolves don't look dangerous. Like if you go to a zoo, I mean, we know they have large teeth, and I think Red was her name, Red Riding Hood or whatever, with the
Little
red
Red
kid,
Riding
Little Red
Hood.
Riding Hood,
She had
yeah.
the little hat.
She was fooled. I always remember that story. And she even the red flags were there because she's like, oh, what sharp teeth you have. So all the red flags were there, and she was still she was catching on, but not quickly. So, wolves don't look dangerous. If they did, none of us would follow them. None of us would allow them into our lives and keep them there. Um, so I'm going to ask you a question here. With your dad, I do feel he was a wolf in sheep clothing. I feel that he was a master at it, and we were all the red, I won't say you and I per se were, but the people that were adults at the time of our abuse were Little Red Riding Hood. And just, they seen it. They seen the signs and, some of the things, the sharp teeth. And that it's like, there's a Bible verse too that says, "You'll know them by their fruits." And for me, one of the biggest patterns is patterns. That's that your dad showed. There were several patterns. I know we talked in the first episode where he had exposed himself, and there was other patterns throughout our childhood and throughout your teenage and adult life before he passed away that you can now see these patterns. And I guess that's where, you can best describe him than I can, because all I seen was a monster, but you lived with him and, I knew of the patterns, but as a child, we can't dissect patterns. But
Right.
as these adults, and I'm going to call them our moms, our Little Red Riding Hood ladies today, there was patterns, and as spiritual as they were, quote unquote, and in the church as much as they were, why didn't the sharp teeth? Why didn't the long snout? Why didn't any of that raise red flags? You think?
Well, I think I know exactly the answer to that. But hold on, let me wet my whistle with some of this pistachio latte here.
I
No, I
might
was
have to
mostly
look at
joking,
this.
but it is so good. The thing with wolves, like they're able to deceive the sheep. And you and I talked about this on the phone. And this is what I'm going to talk about with the listeners. What Kendra and I came up with, Kendra asked me point blank, she was like, "How was your dad able to come in and fool everybody?" She's like, "I don't get it." Like, and he didn't just fool your mom, like he fooled my mom, he fooled grandpa, he fooled
Mhm.
grandma. And here's the thing, he didn't come in to the sheep pen and hand out a bunch of wolf costumes. He didn't come in and teach our whole family how to be wolves. He came in and put on a sheep costume. So if you want to trick sheep, all you have to do is act like the sheep. Like nothing to see here, folks. Like I'm just another sheep. Well, that just goes to illustrate that the family system, the family structure that was already in place was broken, and most families are broken to some extent, like they're constantly in a state of needing repair. And, healthy families identify the issues, they talk about them, they work through them, but our family in particular had a very broken system, that Kendra, I'm sure, has a lot of insight into. But, what I want to point out is that my dad didn't come in and invent a system. He came in and exploited the existing system. So the existing system was that, our parents were raised in an abusive environment, and that's not to say amends weren't made later or anything like that. But, the facts are the facts. They had a tumultuous upbringing. So our parents are already insecure. Our parents are already off balance. Kendra's and my mother's are kind of the existing scapegoats in the family. They're constantly dismissed. Kendra's mom gets labeled as a big baby, or, they talk about her mental health issues. And, she does struggle with depression. She did struggle with postpartum, and those are like normal issues that so many women go through, but, Kendra's mom in particular was, almost villainized for that. And, anything that happened to her, was dismissed for her, like, "Oh, shut up," like, "Oh, shut up," like, "You're always crying about something." And then like with my mom, she was seen as spoiled or unappreciative, so that was the existing family narrative. And those are just 2 examples, like, there's lots of stuff my dad did, but to come in and break away at these 2 women, like, his core targets, like, all he had to do was leverage their existing insecurities, their existing so, basically, just echo everything the other sheep were already bleating about.
Exactly, and I think too, he was easy. It was easy for him to come into our family, and I'm just going to say this, not just him, but anybody with his mindset, a narcissist behavior and just pure evil, like he was. These people, folks, they go into any family dynamic, and it's like when you walk into a room and you can scan it, and you listen at first. You listen to how people talk to people, you listen to how people are labeled, you listen to what they like, what they don't like. These are people are master manipulators. And for our family, I believe he came in and he stroked the ego of our grandfather. That's how, he had that relationship. He stroked people's egos. He fed into what people were saying about others, like you just said about our moms. And
Flattery, a lot of
flattery.
flattery.
Yes, flattery. So if you're out there and you're listening and you're asking, how do you notice these things? So for me, I broke it down to 3 different things. When I look at people as an adult, and children, you teach your children this young. I wish we were listening to this podcast. We had people like us, but how
We
do
didn't have
they
the
treat?
internet.
No, we didn't have
There was
it.
no
Wait, yeah, we
streaming.
did.
We had Casey
We did.
Kasem.
I had the Oregon Trail. That was my favorite thing. And okay, so the
But you
floppy
died of
disk.
dysentery in, like, 12 minutes, like, you were
I
playing
made
that
it.
game.
I made it. I love that game. I think if sorry to get off topic, folks, but like at The Walking Dead, I don't know who watched that. I would live. I absolutely would. I absolutely would live. But anyhow, we can break down 3 patterns of these people. If you have them in your family, you'll see them in one of the biggest things is how do they treat people who they can't benefit from? Do they bring uh calmness, or do they bring control? And your dad was a very controlling person. And then, do they point people like, do they point people to God? Do they point people to good things in life? Or do they constantly point to themselves? And I don't think, I remember conversations like when your dad as an adult would try to talk to me, it was always about him. And when that abuse, if what we're remembering, it was about him. Like for my abuse, it was about you're helping me medically. You're going to save your uncle's life. And as a child, you don't know, exactly what's going on, and you believe that. With our mothers, it was about him. It was about what he could do for the sister-in-law who was poor, who was a single mother, whose husband walked out, what he could do to help her. And it was all about what he did. And
Well,
with your,
right. They
so
kinda make themselves indispensable, like a hero in one hand, the secret villain, and it's like a dual personality.
absolutely. And it's character, I want to know somebody's character over the charisma. And that's signs to look for too when you're trying to scope this out to see if you have a wolf in sheep's clothing in your family is what is their character. I get your dad was very he had the charisma. He could walk into our family Christmases. He could sit down
He's
with our
funny.
uncles. He was funny. He could play euchre. He could do this stuff. Be the buddy, be the guy. But what was his character? What was his true character behind closed doors, like you talked about in the last episode? Some of the things that I heard for the first time. That, that's what people don't get. There's private lives. So until you know somebody's true character, that's maybe why I don't trust people as much. And I'm all about private behavior over public
Right.
image. And your dad was very, outside the home, it was all about public image and the nice house, the what he had, and he constantly talked about it. And now as an adult, I don't know, do you feel that way? I can look back and see all these things, but you don't see him as a child. But I'm hoping somebody listening is like, oh, I know somebody like this.
Well, I think my dad was very intelligent, he wasn't formally educated. He took one English class in college. I don't know if you remember this, and got 100% in that English. Yeah, he went to the community college for a year, took a freshman English class, got an A plus. That we heard about that, for like 10 years, like
Woo-hoo.
like like I'm on the national dean's list for my master's degree, but oh yeah, like good job. But no, he was though. He was extremely sharp, and I think what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of abusive people are very smart. They're able to read people. They're quick, like observationally, like how comedian you can tell when a comedian's smart, because their storytelling and the jokes, like Dave Chappelle. I think he is hilariously a genius. But it's because he's so situationally aware. And I didn't realize it for years, but my dad was teaching me how to be situationally aware. He was teaching me how to read people without signaling that he was pointing out like how to avoid people like him. And it's crazy. Like that's what I've been realizing going through this memory work. Like one of the life lessons my dad taught me, and he taught me a lot, which is another reason like this whole thing's confusing, because he was a terrible person, but he was also a very smart person who was able to like excel in life, due to his intelligence. And he taught me a lot of stuff. So now that I know he's a creeper, I'm like, do I have to like dismiss all this knowledge, or do I just
No.
glean the important stuff from it, and move on?
I think it's great knowledge to have. I
But
really, really do. But if
one
it's
of the
used
things he
wisely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and one of the things he taught me, that kind of sticks out in my mind right now as we're talking about it. He said, Angela, when you're at a bar, this sounds random, but it's like one of the life lessons my dad taught me. He's like, Angela, when you're at a bar, he said, never be afraid of the one that's running his mouth. He's like that hothead at the bar that's that you're arguing with. Like don't argue with that guy. He's like, that guy is all talk. That guy is writing a check his ass can't cash. He's like, don't be afraid of that guy. He said, the guy you do have to be worried about is the guy, his buddy, sitting at the table with him, who's just listening, looking around the room, taking notes. Maybe you see him cracking his knuckles. He's like that friend, that quiet friend. He's got all the receipts. He's the one that's going to beat your ass at the end of the evening. So keep your eye on that guy,
Mm.
not the guy. And, it's just stuff like that that sticks out to me. And one thing I've noticed is people think I'm like hypersensitive, and I always took offense to that, but I am hypersensitive, and I don't think it's a negative thing. It's born out of trauma. It is born out of trauma, but I can still leverage it as a gift. And I do notice mood change, like very subtle mood changes, like I could be arguing or talking with Jimmy and just say like, what's wrong? And he's like, what are you talking about? Nothing's wrong. And I know something's wrong because I saw his body position change, his breathing changed, he sighed, his eyes like, and I know all these things. And I'm pretty sure Kendra knows all these things too, because you have to be aware, like you have to know when the other shoe is going to drop,
Yeah,
so like,
you're
we can
made
see all it.
yeah, through trauma, you're made very aware of what your surroundings. I'm to the point, like if I go to Walmart, I'm sure everybody's seen like these TikToks or social media posts, all these things happening where young women are taken, blah 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 blah. I am the most cautious at all times, and I'm not tooting my own horn, but because of everything I've been through, it is just second nature for me to always be on guard, always looking, always reading. I do read rooms, not to be malicious or to do harm, but I try to read people's just so I know how to handle things. Or I just want to make sure that I'm going to be comfortable in that room or comfortable in my surroundings. And I do believe that is, from trauma. One of the other things is I asked myself before we started this, why was it so easy for our mothers to be the Little Red Riding Hood, and why it was so easy for them to fall for this manipulation, and why was it easy for everybody? And sheep follow willingly. Wolves lead by pressure, they lead by fear, and they lead by guilt. And the conversations that you and I have played over and over with your dad during abuse, that is exactly what he did. When he, your mom and him, when they, I'm sure when they got into spats, I guarantee you he attacked her weak points. My mother,
Absolutely.
so that is how it is so easy. They see this charismatic guy. My mom's seeing a guy that's like, wow, he's helping us. And your mom's seeing, oh, I've got this given to me. And they literally avoid or ignore how it gets to that point, that he does behind closed doors pressure. He does behind closed doors instill fear. I remember him instilling fear not to say anything, and the guilt of him telling us now, especially you, don't tell, because that would really hurt mommy. That's how these wolves operate, and I'm sure I
Well,
think you can feel the same.
oh, absolutely. Yeah. You told me recently, and it took me aback a little bit. I had to think about it for like it was one of those things, I don't want to say I ruminated, but, like I thought about it, for like 3 days. You told me that I was spoiled when I was a kid. And, can you say what that looked like to you? Like why you said that? Because, I want to talk about that a little bit
I didn't
because I
say
think it
they
pertains to my father. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't say that you were spoiled like coming from me. I was elaborating on what you had said, where they bought you the brand new bedroom set. They did, all that stuff. And if you didn't know what was happening to you, you would think, wow, this kid has it all. What is her problem? But I knew what happened to you, and I knew that, you know, it's like now you look back at it, it's like a hush money kind of
Right.
thing. But yeah, that is what I meant by it. I wasn't saying like from my point of view you were
Oh, yeah,
spoiled,
yeah. No. No,
because
I get that.
God knows I never thought you were spoiled. I felt terrible for having to leave you, but no, from the outside view, if you were to look at Angela's life, and I don't know, I can't remember, because I mean, I know you had sleepovers a couple times where I was there with your friends, but I don't know if you had people over at the house often. But if you were to come over to her house, and they had a beautiful home, and Angela had a beautiful bedroom, and she had pretty much every Disney movie, every toy, a piano for her piano lessons. She had everything from the
Telescopes, microscope like,
telescopes.
remember
I
when I
mean,
got all nerdy and got that nice stuff?
yeah, but you didn't get that nice stuff, because it wasn't given out of love. And that's what I want people to understand. That maybe have listened to this podcast, that knew you back then and are just not hearing your story. Please know that sometimes, it's hush money. It is okay, in your dad's mind. I'm not going to try to even wrap myself in his head, because I don't want to be
Right.
anywhere,
I've
any.
tried, like, it's very
Please
upsetting.
don't. Yeah, please don't do it. That scares me. But don't. He was such a master manipulator. He manipulated you from birth. You were manipulated. I mean, it took how many years for this to all come to head? And every time there was an issue, especially there was an issue when you were younger, that had happened, and it was pretty terrible, and it had caused just fear in you. And all of a sudden, you have a brand new bedroom set. And I know why you have that brand new bedroom set, but, other people are probably just thinking, why is this kid complaining? She's spoiled. The one time you went to school with a black eye is probably, you did probably fall. Your mom didn't hit you. You have everything in the world. And that's what people need to realize, is that's what these people do. They buy you off, and they think by getting you nice things. And even as adults, I think
Well,
sometimes we
yeah, he
catch.
was buying my mom off too,
Yeah,
like, and I am
absolutely.
very
She had.
empathetic to that. Like, I don't want to say I can put myself in her shoes, but I know
No.
the extent to which I was abused.
Mhm.
I know that no one understands, what happens in anyone's marriage. Like, a marriage is a
No.
very private and intimate experience. So, in my head, I'm like, man, he had to have been fucking with her hard, and I get that. I get, you know, and I talked previously about her being emotionally volatile, off center. Like, I'm not stupid. Like, he was doing that. Like, he constantly had her on edge. And I don't begrudge any of her reactions when I was, like we're talking about our parents and how bad we had it growing up. I'm not mad at my mom for any of that stuff. Like I want to
No.
talk about it so we understand the environment. But I harbor no ill will about any of that because I get it. I get that he had to have been just constantly messing with her. And here's the other thing. My mom was always suspicious of my dad. Like when we got a computer in 1994, like that was a big deal. And by 1995, this is like baby internet. By 1995, like my mom has keystroke loggers on the computer to like see what he's doing, get his passwords, check his email. Like she already knew that she needed to be looking for, and she was finding stuff like 30 years ago. Like people weren't looking for spyware. She was like, she knew.
Yeah, I try to think back about a lot of those things, and I really honestly, in the bits and pieces I'm able to speak with my mom about, before she shuts down on this topic, is I really do think I'm not going to say your mom because she has never owned it, but I will say I do think she tried leaving him a couple times, and every time she was given something. Like, and then when they moved the one time, across a couple states, she got a brand new beautiful home. She was always given hush money, and I feel bad, but in a way, as an adult, you know what you know. You know that you're being given something to appease you in the moment so that you'll stay and not leave. But that's parents, dear parents, if you have to look at your children. What is more important? That is why I get upset sometimes when I hear the stories from Angela, about things that my aunt has done, to her personally. And it it really it literally will cripple my mind I have to go into prayer. I have to literally back away from the phone, back away from socials, because I can't imagine ever choosing items or materialistic things or people that do that. And I know several people, not just your mom, from people I've talked to, that come out of divorce situations, and the parents, whether it be the mom or the dad, they choose the materialistic things over their children, over what their children's desires or what their children are needing. And you needed a mom to say, hey, their signs were there. And even if those signs weren't there, other signs were there. My children need me. I can do this on my own. I am going to get my children away from this dark man, because honestly, you wouldn't want to leave him if you didn't think there was darkness in him. So that's what helped to me a little bit with your mom is I think every time she did, she had those moments where, okay, I'm leaving. I can do this. And then she never went through with it because she got what she wanted. And then she finally did go through with it. It's a little too late.
Well, I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on this, Kendra? I was thinking, we're talking about my mom being emotionally off center. We're talking about my dad just fucking torquing her all the time. So just he was. And that is what I would see behind closed doors, just him constantly nagging her, while she's cooking. And she was like a consummate housewife. She was putting in the housework, she wasn't sitting on the sofa watching soap operas. She was cooking, she was cleaning, she was sewing, she was doing all the shit. And he was just constantly nagging her and undermining her. But I wonder, you know, like my dad's abusing me, like just maliciously abusing me. So like I'm off center too, like, like I'm always on edge, so she talks about me being a little brat. Well, I'm being a little brat, because I'm being molested every night. She's she's getting her own abuse. She'll never talk about it, so we're both being abused. We're both off kilter. And so she doesn't know how to handle me. Like I'm not being handled like a normal kid. One, because I'm being molested. Two, I'm autistic. Neither one of these things are being understood. And she doesn't know how to handle me. And so now she's just frustrated because every time I throw a tantrum, instead of backing her up and doubling down on the punishment, my dad is turning around and buying me ice cream or buying me a present or, sitting me on his lap. And that was, like we say shut up money and stuff. And it is that, but I don't think he purposefully tried to turn me against my mother. I don't think he was pitting us against he might have been.
No.
But,
No.
but that was an unintended side effect of that, because basically, like, if he was beating my ass or something, like, usually my dad would only get involved, like, if my mom was like, "Well, aren't you gonna do something?" Like, like, "Aren't you gonna go it?" And then, like, he just fucking wail on me, with a belt.
I don't think he pinned you guys against each other, but I think through it all, I'm trying to tread lightly. I always try to tread lightly with our moms. Um, I do
Well, it
think, and
just
I've said this to you before, it created a jealousy.
right.
I do think your mom was jealous.
She's like, "Why is
And
this brat being rewarded for being a brat?" Basically.
yeah, and let's just say she did know about some things. Well, she obviously was told by a doctor, but let's say she knew about more things because you cannot live in a house where this is going on repetitively and not know. Yeah, I'm sorry. I will never buy it. You're not going to tell me. I can forgive, but you're not going to tell me that you never knew. And that, your dad going to buy you ice cream or your dad buying you this, or he, buys you the new bedroom set, the toys, the telescopes, all this stuff. And it was bought constantly. I mean, new homes, new things all the time. She wanted to have dogs, so she started this puppy stuff, and he always, abided along with it. So I think it created a jealousy. I think your mom was jealous of you in a way. I like she wanted to love, you and your brother, but I think there was such a I don't know. And I'm kind of torn on that. I really, in my heart of hearts, it created a jealousy because if you're not jealous of somebody, then you can go back and look back at stuff and easily own it, easily say, "Oh my God, I'm sorry that I didn't see this. I'm sorry," and then go forward and have the best relationship ever.
Yeah, you've alluded to my bedroom twice now. I think I'm ready to talk about that. We could talk about that a little bit. So in 7th grade, I've started I'm starting to figure out that it might have had to do with hormones too. With a lot of the with a lot of our mental health conditions, it's almost like the hormone change of puberty kind of exacerbates a lot of things, or just kind of shifts around different symptoms that we hadn't seen before. I've had a lot of intimate experience with this, and that's why I can, maybe say that that might have been what was happening with me. But in 7th grade, it everything just kind of came falling down all at once, and it's like my body started shutting down. I was really, really upset. I was really upset and panicked. And, I'm 12. I don't know what's going on. Kendra's nodding her head. She knows what was going on, but I didn't know what was going on. And physically, what was happening is that I started stuttering a lot. I rewatched this last podcast episode. I noticed there's a couple spots where I stuttered. When things are so upsetting to me, like it is hard for the words to leave my body. So I was stuttering a lot. I was shaking. I was shaking a lot and just crying inconsolably. And what happened was, my parents took me to the hospital and I was admitted for a week where they were running, tests and stuff, trying to see if something was wrong neurologically. Um, After a week, the doctors approached my parents and said, look, uh, the only way the only way your insurance is going to cover a longer stay is if we admit her to the mental health unit. So we're going to have to admit your daughter to the mental health unit in order to run additional tests. So, I was in the hospital for a month under psychiatric care. And, during that time, my dad is so far up my ass. Like, he won't leave my side. He's buying me gifts. He won't let me talk to any psychiatrist. Um, and they eventually concluded, they told my parents that basically I was having migraine related seizures. And basically, due to my hormones, they said due to the puberty onset, it was causing migraines that were like manifesting in these seizure like symptoms. And so I got released from the hospital. And, so from the time I was 12 on, I'm 12 years old. I'm on antidepressants. I'm on Zoloft from the time I'm 12. Now I'm 45. I'm still on antidepressants. So that kind of began like this whole onset of, them applying this label, kind of lumping me in with Kendra's mom, in a sense, like, well, Angela, like she's crazy. And now now they've been validated by the well, not really validated by the doctors, but they have the validation they need. They say, well, like Angela's crazy. Angela's got the mental health issues. So it's like that was an invitation for like the shut up talks to start coming, even louder, even harder, even more frequently. But then, yeah, when I got home from the hospital, uh, my dad was just showering me with presents and, told me I could remodel my bedroom. And that was a big deal for me, but everything changed. Like we're talking like paneling, flooring, windows, curtains, furniture, like everything about my bedroom was different. And I wonder too now, Kendra, like coming into that environment, like that had to have scared my dad, like he was obviously scared I was gonna, blow his lid. So the bedroom was shut up money, but I'm wondering too if that kind of like helped repress some of my memories because now like that entire physical environment's different, so like like looking around the room, I'm not going to be triggered by the same stuff.
I
So
remember the shift that came with your bedroom. There was a huge shift. We were there the night you came home, and and you and I were in the bedroom alone, and we shared a moment of you know where all I could do was hold you because I couldn't say I understand. I couldn't say anything because at that time I knew that you were fragile, and I was screaming inside, please remember, this is why you were going through this. But I also remember, and that shift came with your dad really hammering down, and your mom, our relationship, and really that's when I became this wild teen before I even became a wild teen.
or you think
I
that was
didn't come.
kind of the onset?
Oh, I think that was the onset because I'm at an age now, and God forbid if you and I were ever alone. And I think that's why he was driving that wedge or putting that in your head. Don't go near her. Don't go near her. She's this wild. She's this partier, blah, blah, blah. And I hadn't even partied yet. I was not wild, but was already being labeled and to I think he was scared. He was so scared because the craziness of your room being remodeled. I mean, it all happened while you were in the hospital. We were there the night you came home. You still were not in a good place. You were still not. I think you knew even returning home. It's like subconsciously. You and I have talked about that night. Subconsciously, you knew you did not want to be returned there. You did not want to go back because you knew what was going to happen or what was going to continue. And I think he knew with us getting older and the conversations that we could possibly have, or I could possibly say to you, he lived in fear. I'll never forget. Justin, my husband does RC car racing, and we had gone with another couple out to Ohio, and while the guys were racing, me and my girlfriend had planned a shopping day with your mom, and I was actually looking forward to it. But your dad, I mean, how old was I? I might have
Like
been,
22, 23?
I was before I had kids. So yeah, 20,
Okay.
maybe 20, 21. I will say 21. I was 21 years old. And I thought, okay, this is going to be a good step. I'm not going to be alone with my aunt. My girlfriend's with me. We're going to have a good day. I'm going to be able to put some of this to rest in my head mentally. Your dad was supposedly busy. I wasn't going to see him. We weren't supposed to go to the house. And then all of a sudden, my aunt calls. She's like, "Oh, I want you to come to the house. We want to show it to you." And I just clammed up like, ugh. And then all of a sudden, my aunt and I cannot be alone together. He goes shopping with us. Your dad didn't like to shop. I never remembered him liking to shop. And
No,
all
he wanted to
day,
make sure he knew everything you were saying.
yeah. And so that, I mean, and it reminds me, and the reason I'm connecting the two, it speaks volumes. When somebody is abuser, and say they've abused a child and another child, they're going to alienate, and they're
You don't
going
want those
to,
2 kids talking, no.
no, God, no. And, you and I, we never stopped talking. I remember coming to a play when you were in high school. We always stayed talking, but I am proud of the fact that I didn't speak up. I mean, I know it sounds terrible because I'm glad that I didn't force it upon you. I didn't vomit like our last episode. I didn't vomit it all up on you because I don't think you at that stage in your life would have been able to handle it all. And I think you would have cut me completely off and said, you are crazy. This didn't happen. And but I see now that bedroom, you coming home, that was a huge shift. And that is when he really started wailing home the fact that I am this terrible teenager. And if your mother allowed you around me, you were going to end up terrible just like me. And folks, let me tell you, we both turned out great.
Well, and that's when his like, he kinda changed the way he, mentally abused me after that because, anytime I was upset about something, anytime I would cry a little or express pain or, say like, "Hey, like, this is enough," he'd get really mean. Like, he turned mean after that. He'd say, "Oh, you don't want daddy to have to take you back to that place, do you? Like, he's like, you better get it together or, we're just going to have to go back to that place." And let me tell you something, Kidder. I don't know if you know this, but, I had a bully in 7th grade. She was, I hope my, I hope my school friends are listening, they're going to send me a text afterwards and they're going to know who I'm talking about, but oh man, this old bully was a bitch and she was in 8th grade and her aunt worked at the hospital and found out that I had been admitted into the mental health unit. And she told my bully, and oh man, did my life suck after that. Like
Mm.
she was spreading the rumors at school. She pushed me down a flight of stairs once. And it's funny because, like, my mom was so concerned that I had a bully at school, that my mom was going down to the office and yelling. I had a tape recorder in my backpack, like she wanted me. So it's kind of funny that she was so like gung ho on catching this bully, when I had one she was sharing her bed with. But, anyway,
Right.
so when dad would say, like, do you want to go back to that place? I'm like, the fuck no, I don't want to go back to that place. Like everybody at school sucks.
Yeah. He, yeah, he, that time. And I think that's when you could tell, looking back through things and things that we remember, your dad aged a lot after that, like a lot. The older you
Did
got,
he?
the faster he aged. Oh, absolutely. The way he looked, and pictures and stuff, and his nervousness, it's almost like I take it as a reward, because every time I
My
was
dad did
near
die
him,
young.
yeah, he did. And not have, I'm not gonna say what I feel about
No
that, but
comment.
anyhow, no comment. But what every time we didn't realize how much power we actually had. And if I can give anybody who has been abused and say their abuser is still alive, and they were abused as a child, you have so much power and you don't even know it. Because I remember standing outside of our grandparents' house, with my husband, and your dad just literally nervous as all get out, shaken. I remember when we went shopping that day, the whole day, you could just tell anxiety was on him, his nervousness. And looking back at those things, if I knew the power I had,
Right.
but maybe would have acted sooner. So if you have that power and you become an adult and say your abuser is still alive and maybe it is in your family, you can you have the power. You hold it. They are literally living in fear of this coming out. I mean, and there are some people that are sick, really sick and twisted more than this that don't care. But those people are all pretty much all in prison. But your dad, I could
He cared.
tell he cared. He was scared. He aged. He never, speaking about driving a wedge between us, I really believe he drove the wedge between our mothers because
Absolutely.
yes, your mom, the racing thing and the jealousy stuff, but I think he put that there. And because they were I remember when we were very, very little, he was very close. Or not he, she, our moms were very, very close. And my mom, even to this day, like she will call your mom, once, at least once a week or once every other week. She craves that relationship with her. Um, Angela, what do you think adults should look at with children who might be showing signs that we've said before of abuse? But how should they look at the people in their lives? Like, how do you think they should spot a wolf in sheep clothing?
I think one thing that I've noticed about people that I didn't notice before, so maybe this is where, like, the adult understanding comes into play better than the childlike understanding. So, I don't wanna say, like, I'm suspicious of people all the time because that's not the case, but, if I were to say that maybe you have friends, like, on Facebook who look like they do posts, and you could look at it and be like, that's a social capital post." Almost like they're humble bragging about how helpful they are, or do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, "Oh, look at these 10 pictures of me volunteering today," or, "Oh, I just got back from a trip, where I was helping out my little brother," and they're all pointing out, like, these nice things that they did, but I'm like, "Why is that a post?" Um, that's kind of what I key in on now. And, the aspect of my dad's personality that I touched on, we didn't really go into a whole lot, was that dual personality. So he wasn't just smart, wasn't just funny. Like, he wasn't just validating, he was helpful. He was helpful and he was indispensable. So, like, if he's Kendra's mom's secret hero, going in, fixing stuff at her house, or even disciplining her kid once in a while. Kidder and I can eye roll about that, but single moms, feel overwhelmed by parenting. So if a concerned uncle comes in and says, well, like your daughter needed a good ass whooping, I took it, and so she could be like, oh, I'm so thankful. Like, how hard it is being a single, it like that's gross, but my dad was quick to beat up someone's abusive boyfriend. Our grandma was married to a real buster for a while. My dad knocked him around a few times. Family members who are incarcerated, sending them care packages and stuff. Um, and so yes, you could be generous, like, yes, you could be loving, but when someone is, like, generous and loving and, like, talks about it all the time, like, I think that's what you have to worry about, where they're always pulling that focus back to themselves, like, "Look how good I was," like, "Look what a good husband I was. Look what a good father I was. Like, look how hard a worker I am." Like, they wanna highlight, like, all these really good things, so, like, all the bad things get brushed under the rug.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. It's looking and see who's bragging, see who's constantly, overly, over overly manipulating. And I want everybody to know our moms, even though they're the Red Ribbon, why can't I say this?
I don't know. I said she was wearing a hat earlier, and I've been thinking about that for 45 minutes. I'm like, somebody's gonna point out the fact, like, I kn Little
Yeah,
Red Riding Hood was not
let's
wearing a
not
hat. She was wearing a
let's
hood. Okay, so, like, I know what she was wearing. Like, let's
yeah,
be
let's not cut this out because this is hilarious. Because I've been picturing the same. Okay. So on a serious note, our moms, Red Riding, Red, the story. Um, they were the
bitch in the
her,
cape, man.
yeah, where they were her today, and don't be that. You have to be aware, and everybody I know always thinks, well, if it's family, no. That's where most attacks come from in child abuse is from a family member. The second way is, from the church. So be cautious. Don't leave your kids with just anybody, and be cautious, and look out for other people's kids. There's
Well,
that saying,
I'm
it
sorry,
takes a
who's gonna
village.
protect your kids more than or who's gonna
Yeah.
not protect your kids, who's gonna protect your secrets more than a
Yeah.
family member? You know,
Right.
like, that's
Right.
why they're all so tight, because they all have secrets, so they protect each other's secrets because they got their own secrets.
Absolutely. So I'm going to close this out today. Angela, I appreciate your honesty as always, and I always look forward to our conversations. I'm going to close us out with prayer today. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. And I'm sure we will when we listen back to it as well. We're still, yeah, we are working on healing, but it's a constant work in progress, and we've come a long way.
Yeah, and if
Um,
you're not, like, a little triggered listening to the podcast, then, maybe it's the wrong show for you, you're like
yeah, maybe. God of light and truth, you come before. You aware that you see what others have missed, and you know what has been hidden in silence. You are the shepherd who protects the vulnerable, the one who does not overlook harm and does not confuse power with goodness. For every listener carrying wounds from betrayal, abuse, or broken trust, especially those harmed by people who wore the mask of safety, we ask that you draw near now. Remind them what happened to them was not their fault, that you never sided with the wolf, and that you have always stood with the wounded. Lord, I ask you to expose what needs to be exposed, not to shame, but to free, not to destroy, but to protect. Give us discernment without fear, courage without cruelty, and wisdom rooted in love. For those who lead, teach, parent, or hold influence, search our hearts. Strip away anything false. Make us shepherds who guard the flock, not voices that feed on it. Bring healing where trust was broken. Bring rest where hypervigilance has lived. And bring hope to places that have long felt abandoned. We trust you, God, because you are gentle with the broken and fierce against injustice. We place every story, every listener, and every next step into your care. Amen.